It's October the 8th, 2021. I'm Dana Durnford. Hope everybody's doing good. We got an earthquake in Japan today. We're not going to cover tonight. And it's a big earthquake, showing a 5 in some parts of the interior up by Tokyo on a scale of 7, which brings it up to an 8 on the Richter scale. Just going to play a little propaganda from the 1950s before we jump into it.
There will soon be an end to this cold and wicked war when those hard-headed communists get what they're looking for. Only one thing that will stop them and their atrocious fun. If General MacArthur drops an atomic bomb, they'll be fired, dust and metal flying all around, and the radioactivity will burn them to the ground. If there's any commies left, they'll be all on the run. If General MacArthur drops an atomic bomb.
So that was a song promoting the dropping of atomic bombs, in case you missed it. So the poll today is, are these plumes that covered the entire northern hemisphere, the global warming? So what you're looking at is radioactive fallout plumes. These models are only based on venting from the Fukushima meltdown. They're not based upon the reactor cores and the fuel pools that caught fire, blew up, and melted down. They're still melting down today. So these plumes are brutal, trust me. This is brutal. It means every creature, every insect, every bird, every animal, every mammal, and every human were saturated with fission products. The ultimate betrayal. And so we got a vote tonight. Is radioactive plumes that cover the entire northern hemisphere global warming? And we got 14 votes, and somebody actually says no for some reason. So these plumes are pulsing energy, these little atoms, at the speed of light. Imagine how much energy it takes to make something move the speed of light. It's pure energy, and it's going to do it forever. These plumes will never go away. And when you get into organisms and life, and birds and insects, they sterilize them and then kill them, ultimately ending the species. So both of these are official pictures of Reactor 4, and that's supposed to be Reactor 4. And so all the media showed you that picture over there in order to trick you and deceive you. All the media worldwide, all the universities participated in that deception. Now, why would they all do something like that? Because it's an extinction event. Now, anybody remembers in January here in Newfoundland, we had 15 whales wash up on the west coast over by Corner Brook. I went over and investigated it. They were there for 36 days. 36 days. That's incredible. And media didn't report on it. But we got a story coming up that they did report on. So emaciated bears, emaciated whales, emaciated animals. That's the new norm now since the Fukushima nuclear meltdowns. Now we got to kill animals so other animals can survive. And whales won't stop committing suicide in New Zealand. All since Fukushima, of course. The West Coast grey whale population since 2016 has dropped by 6,000 whales. 6,000 whales. The original projections for radioactive fallout in the Pacific Ocean only. This is one of them.
Maybe worse than thought. Studies from last year indicate that radioactive water will contaminate the entire Pacific Ocean in just 6 years. Kim Min-ji reports.
This graphic shows the gradual contamination of the Pacific Ocean due to leaks of radioactive water from the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan. The simulation, which was run by a German marine research institute, shows the entire Pacific waters being polluted by radioactive water in just 6 years.
Right, but it came in airborne in just 6 days. This is another plume model of the radioactive fallout. So that's the Pacific over there. This is the Atlantic Ocean. That's America, that's Canada, Iceland, Greenland, Europe. Saturated in fission products. It's pulsing energy every second. That's your global warming. In steroids, this overdrive. It's been going on for 75 years, but this was a major catalyst now. Ultimate worst case scenario underway at the Fukushima nuclear power plant in Japan had 4 reactors, the biggest in the world at the time, meltdown. New York Times. Experts suspect intense contamination is seeping. You know what the word seeping means? From under meltdown reactors and into the Pacific will surpass even the leaks. So you got seeping and leaks. Does this look like seeping and leaks to you, anybody on this planet? It's the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, and Europe covered in fission products. This is Europe or France's model, and many, many models. We have mass mortality events for many species, not just pilot whales, by the way. Minke whales, you have mortality events for the gray whales, as I just showed you, over 6,000, up to 7,000 this year apparently. And humpback whale, unusual mortality events. This is just but a few of them, the mortality events. All the species are dying in mass, and they all have one thing in common: they're emaciated. The North Atlantic right whale, unusual mortality, ES rather. These are all emaciated. Alaska seabirds continue to die off for another summer. Seabirds were found emaciated. And we're talking about many species: storm petrels, fulmars, shearwaters, Cassini Ucluelets, kittiwakes, puffins. We haven't been really noticing any salmon up here, so we've been noticing that the bears have been getting skinnier and getting more aggressive, emaciated. But now, you notice how they framed the narrative that time about salmon. So they were expecting 5 million sockeye, and only 600,000 came up. I was doing expeditions along the coastline when this was happening, by the way. And so the grizzly bears are bearing the brunt of it, but they eat 95% of their diet is roots and grass and berries and grubs and stuff like that, not salmon. So if they can't get their salmon, they have other foods, in other words, that they're acclimated to, genetics pure selection, to be able to put the extra weight on. Mysterious mass deaths of Alaskan seabirds. Tens of thousands of birds have washed up on the beaches of Alaska. I'm just getting you up to speed of the last couple of years. The common murres, was over 1 million of them washed up, dead. They are starving. The birds say they, biologists who examine the birds say they appear emaciated. We know they're starving because their stomachs are empty. They lost all the weight, their muscle mass is gone. New York Times, ocean life faces a mass extinction. We may be on the precipice of a major extinction event. That was 2015. I was actually on the ocean doing research expeditions. That year I was gone for 5 months. And I covered some of the videos there, obviously. And I covered all the way from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska for 6 years and done species counts along that whole coastline. And including up the estuaries and rivers and streams. And the species were missing everywhere we went. So we went all over the coastline, year after year after year. And if you fill the beaches up with people, you're not going to find the species to your left. They're permanently exterminated now. They're permanently gone. Try wrapping your mind around that. Permanently gone. And I know because I went up and took these pictures. They had found radiation throughout the whole entire coastline. So 7,000 species to your left are permanently gone. That's permanent. All those species to your left are 100% gone. And I went up and repeated it year after year. The species never came back. This is right by Alaska. I'm just a few kilometers away from the Alaska border. It's an 18-foot tide exchange. As you can see, there's nothing on the shoreline. It's low tide, and there is nothing on that shoreline.
Takes off? Yeah?
I'm talking to Zoe, puppy. There's nothing left on the shorelines. Look at it. See how colorless the whole coastline is? Well, to your left is what it should look like. See, that's what it should look like where I'm going in. U.S. government model of the Fukushima particles covered the northern hemisphere. This is NOAA's model showing over a 40-day model. And this is hemorrhaging radiation, a sustained plume, a continuous plume. A continuous plume. NOAA. The hell is a HOA, Dana? I don't know. Hidden, I was trying to click the button to get me to pop up, but hidden NOAA animation shows the ocean all along the U.S. West Coast is contaminated with Fukushima by the end of March 2011. By the end of 2011, this would have been the ocean. That's from NOAA's model. Of course, you've seen the radioactive fallout. That was 40 days, within 40 days. So you see the species behind me. The rest of them are to your right there. That's permanent extinction event, right? They never came back. They're permanently gone, the entire coastline. Lawmakers declare a state of emergency right away and intervene at Fukushima. Japan professor issue an SOS now. It's really an emergency. The government is utterly lost. As you can see to the left, those species now are exterminated. That was due to the initial pulse, the big plumes that went through. These, we call them pulses because they're such thick plumes. But the plumes didn't stop. It's a continuous plume. So all the species to your left, all the way to Alaska and British Columbia, Canada, are permanently exterminated. Here's another model of the plume. I'm going to speed it up. And this is March 21st, 24th, 25th, March the 28th. Sorry, March the 28th is when it ends. So it happened on the 11th. So the pictures to your left, you'll never take them again. That's an extinction event, what you're looking at. Deteriorating plant threatens a mass extinction around the world. And again, let me flip now. I took all these pictures to your right. These are authentic before and after in the same place. I repeated these experiments year after year. We're almost to Egg Island up there. Seas are definitely building. It's Monday, the 15th. Fog is so thick you can't see a bloody thing. One of my tow lines is snapped. Still hanging on by a big wave now between me and the skiff, and I'll break that one. That's the tow rope for the Zodiac. You see how the braid actually started to come undone, but stayed together. 4.3 miles per hour. Back and forth. 3.9 knots. 4.6 miles per hour, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, you get the picture. A little too rough out there. So I've done the whole coastline year after year after year is all I'm trying to show you. So I'm not some random person. I actually went up and documented it myself. That was typically what the weather is like. So spiders, we noticed in the last 2 years, disappeared. Also, it's gone on the west coast, but also now on the east coast. There was no fish jumping in the ponds this year on the research expeditions. I was actually in the woods yesterday and today. I'll show you some video that come up maybe. Spider bioconcentrated radioactive silver at 1,000 times the level in soils. And so, because they're eating all the other insects that are bioaccumulating it too, see? So they get a bigger dose. And they disappeared. We know the same is true now for Nova Scotia because we talked to researchers from there. The ocean is covered in fission fallout. And that the sea spray, the radioactive sea spray, has been shown to blow hundreds of kilometers inland, and people get an exceptional dose. Cesium, uranium, plutonium, and fission products is dispersed throughout the water column from the surface to the ocean floor. That's permanent. Everything is pulsing energy at the speed of light. It heats the ocean up, heats the planet up. And that radioactive fuel in the ocean, let alone the airborne, ends up on the coastline, is liberated in waves and spray, and blows into the communities, and people get an exceptional dose. So does the insects and the birds and the animals and mammals. All the species within 200 kilometers of the coastlines are acclimated to more salt in their diet. That's typical for oceans, but radiation is released from the ocean the exact same way. And so when animals and mammals and insects and birds and humans inhale, drink, or consume radiation, it's in your body pulsing energy at the speed of light, and your body attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells. That's permanent. So animals and birds and insects and animals and humans, their immune systems are instantly compromised because you have to produce white blood cells. That displaces your red blood cells, and the insects' red blood cells, and animals, and mammals, and birds' red blood cells. It displaces them, that's carrying oxygen and nutrition permanently, and replaces with white blood cells attacking the pulse inside of them. And there's thousands of fission products. So when you hear cesium dispersed throughout the water column from the surface to the ocean floor, remember there's 1,000 fission products that we know for sure. Let's get into it. So, dead whale lodged on the hull of a tanker. Look at this. Now, that's a really weird picture. How the hell did he end up way up there? Because he looks emaciated to me on top of that. Now, if he was alive, he would have just wiggled out of there, obviously, right? There was a dolphin washed up on the beach 2 years ago in Florida, and the dolphin was like 7 feet long, and it had a shower hose with a faucet attached to it, and it's shoved down its throat into the stomach. That somebody done when it washed up on the beach, right? And they seen the debris there, and they shoved it up the dolphin's throat. But the media reported it as if that's what killed the dolphin, that the dolphin was going around, that it doesn't know the difference between food and debris. It's absurd. So that whale obviously was dead to end up in a position like that. Otherwise, you would have just flopped off it. And like, first off, how do you end up there? Because it's diving, right? And coming across the ocean is, how the bow goes down, the bow comes up, the bow goes down. Japanese Coast Guard released photos of a boat that pulled into the harbor in Japan with a dead whale across its hull, which makes sense. It's Japan, right? It's nuclear wasteland. It's not clear whether the whale was already died when it came into contact with the ship or whether the ship killed the whale. I think it's pretty clear the whale was dead. Like, first off, whales are not actually stupid. Pre-Fukushima, you didn't hear about whales ever getting hit by ships. In the last 3 years in particular, every single story tried to blame it on a ship. A number of the whales showed signs of emaciation. Emaciated whales, in other words. Then they ended up on the ship because they died or starved to death. Scary problems on the California coast. There may be no food anywhere along the Pacific except in isolated areas. It's like a crime scene investigation. Now, I was on the ocean doing research expeditions when they were talking about this. This is what I was doing. There was nothing in the pictures. Just showed you the pictures already, see? Dozens of pilot whales dead. It was actually 50. Whales are thought to have got lost because they're big, stupid animals, and the ocean's pretty big in Dana. I actually got lost today in the woods on the bike, and I ended up coming out on the highway and had to drive down the side of the highway to make it home tonight. So dozens, I'll show you that after this story, actually. There's a couple little short videos of today. So there's 50 whales washed up. At least 50. There's more than 50 whales washed up on the coastline of Iceland, right? Now people say, oh, Dana, pilot whales, that's what they do. One dies, they all die. That's how it works, Dana. And I guess that's true for what I showed you earlier for the unusual mortality event for gray whales and humpback whales and mink whales and fin whales. By the way, all the killer whales are emaciated too. All the other species are emaciated. And if you go back pre-Fukushima, this was an extraordinary rare event. But if you go back and look at nuclear testing in the ocean and atmospheric testing, you'll find that there's a correlation. RUV radio cited an eyewitness as saying, to the best of their knowledge, nothing like that had ever happened in the region before in the Stony Coast. And tourists had notified the police when they found the dead whales, and most of the animals had already died. Now, some were alive. Some were alive of that group. And the whales were thought to have lost their bearings in the shallow water before washing up on shore. Were thought. I think they lost their way. And they washed up on the beaches because there was big waves, Dana. It's like a 6-year-old wrote this or something. That's the whale's habitat, moron. Whales don't get lost. Or that would be normal, not unusual, or the only time you heard tell of it. Pilot whales are pack animals. Yeah, really? And so are humpbacks, and so are sperm whales. We've seen 10 wash up in United Kingdom last year in the same place, all of them emaciated. The gray whales, they can't stop dying. 7,000 since 2016. And pilot whales, they refuse to stop dying now in New Zealand. All of these things got one thing in common. It's all acceleration of all species never seen before since 2011. They can also make navigational areas and lose their way in bad weather, Dana, or why escaping predators. Well, first off, pilot whales hunt and bully killer whales. Look it up. Now, maybe it was the mermaid scared them out of the water, Dana. Gee, I never thought of that. That's amazing. You're probably right. Nuclear engineer, I agree. Fukushima can be an extinction event. Nuclear engineer. Because of radioactive fallout. This is another plume model. Isn't that pretty? Not a pretty plume. That's the Pacific Ocean. That's Hawaii. My finger up Hawaii. And my finger on Newfoundland right there. And that's the Atlantic Ocean, Iceland, Greenland, Europe. Buried in a continuous plume of radioactive fallout, which is the global warming, right? That's global warming. So that's the poll tonight. We got a poll going. 19 votes. 95% says the radioactive plumes that covered the northern hemisphere is global warming. Yeah, because it's pulsing energy every second, right? These plumes are pulsing energy at the speed of light in every direction. On top of that, each one of these atoms, just an invisible snowstorm. Imagine if you had a snowstorm covering the entire planet at the one time. That's what this is, except instead of being cold, it's heat. And so gas, oil, and coal emissions don't pulse energy every second for millions of years. And they don't make plumes like that either, by the way. Fukushima, see these plumes, the reason they make these plumes is because they're little engines too. They're pulsing energy at the speed of light, helps keep them suspended. They're sometimes suspended right close to the ground, where kids and animals are. Yeah, it's just a coincidence all the species have disappeared since Fukushima melted down. Dana? Indeed. A study finds that the giant strontium-90, a bone seeker, released into the body of waters began around 1,000 days after the meltdowns. December 2013 would have put it at that. And then a high levels discharge of beta for tens of thousands of days. So they burn a hole through your lungs, and the insects and animals and mammals and everything lungs, and then it seeks out their bones where it mutates their stem cells. Yay. And inhaling just one radioactive hot particle can cause the illness. There's 1,800 illnesses. Cancer is just one of them, by the way. So what's the chance that every creature and every species got at least one hot particle? Because everything that comes from a nuclear meltdown, by the way, is a hot particle. It's a nuclear meltdown, okay? And 75% of cesium, for instance, gamma, will go into your muscle tissues, including your hearts. So you see an extraordinary big increase of heart attacks. Is a little radiation good for you? No, it's man-made. We have tourism laws because it's very bad for you. That's why we have the linear no threshold. And that a single particle can cause a tumor. But there's 1,800 illnesses will show up before a tumor. Because tumors are latent. Could take 20 years. But there's heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. There's Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome. There's schizophrenia. There's 1,800 illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries for all the species. You don't just cancer. But this is how they brainwash. Oh, I don't see a cluster of cancer, Dana. They were saying that 2 weeks after Fukushima, by the way. Deteriorating plant threatens mass extinction around the world. You know how it does that? It's this global warming, the fallout, pulsing energy every second. not only killing all the species or sterilizing them, but also heating up the planet instantly. The ocean gets heated up because it's buried in radiation. And so now when the cyclones and hurricanes and typhoons go over these oceans, they're much warmer oceans. So you get storms now hitting 200 miles per hour is the new norm. But we don't have any infrastructure on the planet for 200 mile per hour winds because it's, not normal. Almost the entire ground level of the northern hemisphere was covered in fission products from the nuclear meltdowns. In Washington, D.C., we're seeing 450,000 times above detection levels. Persisted for weeks. Well, it persisted for a lot longer than weeks. It's still happening. It's still hemorrhaging out of there.
The fact that the reactor in Japan is 100 times more powerful than the one in Chernobyl, and in fact the two stations, the two power plants in the Fukushima region produced the world's biggest joint amount of energy, and this means of course that this reactor...
They were the biggest in the world, yeah? Each reactor was holding around 700 tons. At the top of the building was decades of reactor cores in truly the most idiotic place imaginable in a fuel pool at the top of the buildings. And they're now spread over the northern hemisphere. There's a study showing humans with sequestering 360 plus atoms of sulfur peroxide, hydrogen buckyballs in their testicles each day. So that's true for animals, and birds, and insects, etc., not just humans. And then you have the French's model. Well, that's a study over there. There's another study in California showing you 1,500 atoms per cubic meter. That backs up that study, obviously, right? There's about 1,000 kinds of fission products you need to be worried about in these invisible plumes that you can't see or smell or touch or hear or feel or pick up or throw rocks at. In the history of science, we've never seen anything like the Fukushima plume heading across the Pacific to US and Canada. Why is Japan allowed to get away with contaminating the ocean? Remember this study from a couple of years ago? Too much junk food tied to massive seabird die-off. That faded away along with their lobster wave version. And so what they claim, because the birds that died, the auklets, they eat zooplankton and phytoplankton at the surface, like storm petrels, right? And a lot of the radiation, phytoplankton bioaccumulates as the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain. And then they talk about this phenomenon known as the blob, first occurred in the fall and winter of 2013. So 3 years after this Neptunium-239 model of TEPCO's dispersal covering the planet, we've seen the blob, which is the radioactive ocean. Seawater is being poisoned at a continuous rate from Fukushima, source of which our lives depend upon, is being corrupted. So you can see this is the plutonium-239 dispersal. By the way, Neptunium-239 decays into plutonium-239, but there was the plutonium-239 dispersal from TEPCO's numbers. And, well, I mean, hang on. It's never going to be a single atom going into your body. You're breathing in immense amounts. But, no, the doctors have shown that a single atom can cause illness. And that works. That works because your body attacks that single atoms in your body, or insects or birds or mammals or animals' body. It's pulsing energy at the speed of light. So the body attacks with white blood cells and builds a tumor around it. It might take 20 years. But for 20 years, your body is attacking that radiation in your body with white blood cells, which displace your red blood cells that's carrying oxygen and nutrition. So that's permanent. So like you cut your finger, it does it for 5 or 6 days, heals it, then your red blood count goes back up again, right? Yeah, the truth's a powerful weapon. Seawater is being poisoned at a continuous rate. And of course, the plutonium dispersals. Plutonium fields forever. They've done this to the whole planet. It's not just... So fears are mounting that Fukushima radiation could lead to dangerous contamination levels in seafood. And then the arrogance, because it's National Geographic, Rupert's... What's his name? I can't remember his last name now. He's a scumbag, originally from Australia, but based out of United Kingdom. He has 600 newspapers. At least for now, the fish are not glowing, so eat up. Just because they don't glow don't mean they're not radioactive. My goodness. Fukushima radioactive plume will continue to hit the shores of the US and Canada for decades and possibly remove the molten core for hundreds of years if ever. And the flow of contamination from the plant will be virtually impossible to stop, right? And it is. And so they want you to think only about cesium-137, but what about all the other cesiums? Curium is the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rods. That's cesium. And curium, you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium, which is named after the devil. And even a low dose will cause damages, see? And this model, I'm just trying to get ahead to the stories again. Because you kind of got to get people up to speed before you can really talk about this subject. Japanese government officials blast the government over Fukushima. Such immoral people let radioactive substances flow out freely and said nothing while contaminating the ocean and the planet, obviously. It's just absurd. And now they're trying to cover the whole thing up. They had to cover the whole planet in radioactive fallout and pretends that they're the victim. Now, we've seen the cover-ups, right? Santa Susana is now regarded as the worst nuclear accident in U.S. history, but it happened in 1959. They hid it away for 55 years. So 50 years after it, they started talking about it. So Santa Susana released 450 times more radiation than 3 Mile Island did. But if you go out and look for the worst nuclear accident in America, they're going to tell you 3 Mile Island. They're not going to tell you Santa Susana, which was a sodium reactor. There's no, it's like a scene from a horror movie. January 20th, 2015, I was on the ocean stuck in a storm. We're seeing all sorts of mysterious going on. There's no food out there. Scientists can't figure out what a mass starvations of seabirds. Well, I showed you the whole coastline is naked. Normally the birds can fly along the coastline if they can't find their migratory, like the squid or herring or anchovies or sardines or krill or herring or whatever. If they can't find that, they go to the coastline. The coastline would have 7,000 species. But as I showed on the expeditions, they were wiped out. They were exterminated. So when they got to the coastline, there wasn't even insects, let alone that. Unprecedented cataclysmic die-off of birds on the entire west coast, from Mexico to Alaska. Beaches covered with dead bodies. Never seen anything like it. I showed what happened anyway. Scientists just discovered a seabird hotspot. It's already at climate risk. So the climate, the climate is Fukushima. That's Fukushima there. That's Fukushima there. And so we got a poll up. Is radioactive plumes that cover the entire northern hemisphere global warming? And 85% gets it, 15% don't understand something so simple as a plume covering the northern hemisphere. It actually covers the whole planet. The model stops there on the 31st of March. Happens on the 11th of March, right? If the model keeps going, the southern hemisphere is covered. It's an invisible, continuous plume. A continuous plume that's still coming out. That's global warming, heating up the planet, pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. Gamma, alpha, beta, neutrons burst. So they're saying scientists just discovered a seabird hotspot. Oh, and it's already a climate risk. Winter cyclones responsible for killing seabirds every year. Actually, it's not. They're perfectly at home in the bad weather. Once they dive down 10, 15 feet, it's always the same. That's their environment. They were born into it. Some of these birds only come ashore for a couple of days a year, for God's sakes. You really think that a big storm is the issue? Well, no. This is how they're trying to accommodate the mass die-offs washing up on the beaches. Right? This came out at the same time. Where millions of birds overwinter in the North Atlantic. You really think that they're going to do that year after year if they're going to die? Of course not. Winter cyclones. It's disgusting that anybody wrote that. They should have their degrees taken away from them. That's simply not true. The ocean is the bird's environment, for goodness sakes. So the director of the Bird Society, basically, the Seabird Institute in Maine, these are useful idiots. They're put in these key positions. They're called control opposition. Director of the Marine Bird Program thinks that a storm is going to bother birds that are genetic superior selected to live in that environment. Severe impact on the oceanic environment. Japan is simply dumping the nuclear waste into the sea. An unpredictable amount of damage to the Pacific. Japan fits 1,000 monkeys with Geiger counters to test radiation levels in Fukushima. It shows you how whacked they actually are. It shows you what kind of lunatics these people actually are. They couldn't care less about a human or any species. They really couldn't. Experts baffled as seabirds die for no clear reason on the Scottish coast. That was last week. Mysterious deaths of unprecedented number of seabirds being washed up on the east coast of Scotland are under investigation. When they tell you it's under investigation, in other words, get lost. Guillemots and razorbills, many other species, by the way, have been reported feeding far closer to shore than usual and moving up rivers, freshwater rivers. That's not their environment, see? Many birds found by members of the public on beaches appear to be starving at half their usual body weight. And no specific causes. Maybe they were hit by ships. Maybe they got an enema from a UFO or something. But climate change has been implicated in the reduction. Of course, climate change is the radioactive fall or pulsing energy every second. Because that's the radioactive fallout from multiple nuclear meltdowns. All the species are being wiped out by it worldwide. And everybody's out there pretending, la 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 la. The media have been bought up by a couple of corporations in increments over the last couple of decades. You're going to get the same picture, the same photo, same author, the same headline, the same couple of paragraphs at the same time worldwide. AP has 1,800 medias that aggregate with spider web bots, so it's automatic. Websites, 1,600 websites will automatic grab that story and post it at their site. The same picture, the same author, the same paragraphs, same headlines. It's 100% brainwashing. And it's also increasing extreme weather events. Trying to blame the mass die-offs. This is a new one we've only seen recently. They started doing this one. Number of guillemots, they'll get bored with that and they'll start blaming something else. A number of guillemots have been tested for the flu, all with negative results. They must have broke their hearts. It is thought the toxic algae blooms may be responsible. Yes, and he said that for every die-off for the last 7, 8, 9 years, and it's never been the case. Every single die-off, they say that, it's domoic acid, which is real, by the way. Fukushima kills the phytoplankton, that's the oxygen producer, the carbon sequester, the basis of the food chain. When you kill that off in the ocean becomes more acidic, and so certain algae will proliferate. For sure, that's true, but that's not actually what was happening here. That's their garbage can diagnosis, right? A seabird ecologist UK centre, like whenever you hear these words, a seabird ecologist, or UK this, or USA that, or Russia this, or Iceland that, these are always controlled oppositions. These are always goblins. And you see them on the street, your first reaction is to cross the road. The Research Institute leading the investigation said, that's the wolf in the sheep's pen. We are seeing an unprecedented number of guillemots dying over a huge area of the coastline, and unusual behaviors. We're seeing feeding very close to beaches among swimmers when normally they steer clear of people, and up to 20 miles plus up rivers. And it's unheard of for these saltwater birds, by the way. Oh, the birds are dying from starvation. This suggests there's a lack of fish prey in the ocean. So perhaps starvation is being caused by something else. Climate change. And of course, climate change is radioactive fallout. It covers the entire hemisphere, pulsing energy every second. That's climate change right there, baby. Ascension Island. Climate change with the frequency of the toxic. Yeah, because of the radioactive plume, maybe. Extreme weather. You can't blame extreme weather on all these die-offs. When they were dying off, there was no extreme weather out there whatsoever. Later in dead winter, there's extreme weather, but not when this was happening. Can kill all seabirds, and if prey fish are scarce, they become weakened through starvation. Instead of flying across the mountains this year, they decided to march across the mountains. And that's why they died, see? Oh, that makes perfect sense. Thanks. Now you sleep better. We don't know the exact cause, but we know it's climate change. And there's climate change. Look, it's radioactive fallout, pulsing energy at the speed of light every second, symmetrically throughout the entire planet like an invisible snowstorm. Since Fukushima melted down, it's a continuous plume, never stops, see? That should horrify you. Climate change, driving, please pull you over. Next time, please pull you over and ask you why you speed. You say, climate change. You know what the cop's going to say? Shut up and write you a ticket, okay? That's what you got to do with these people. Tell them to shut up and write your Congress and get them kicked out of the position of authorities. Creating more extreme weather events. Fukushima is creating more extreme weather events. Not climate change, Fukushima change is what it is. The world is in a natural and climate crisis. No, the catalyst was Fukushima. We need urgent action from government. Really? From the nuclear industry, because that's who your government. They captured your media, they captured your universities and key positions in your government and your regulators. All over the last 75 years. They're a direct threat to all species, not just humans. And they hate us. They despise us for some reason. Seen an increase in call-outs to sick guillemots in areas in recent months, so sustained. It's not just like an event. The majority seem underweight, no obvious injuries. And they're always looking for something to blame it on you and your tin cans and your pop bottles and your cardboard. Many seem lethargic. That happens when you have less red blood cells and more white blood cells, by the way. Also, unfortunately, we don't know anything behind the high number of deceased and sick birds. Anything we say at this stage would be speculation. When you put that in the first paragraph, extreme weather events, speculation, algae blooms are speculations. Climate change is speculations. Do you get it? Anyone finds a sick or injured seabird, for God's sakes, don't give it to these scumbags. Go bring it to the vet or something. Don't give it to the monsters. If they suggest the Scottish SPCA, go somewhere else. A seabird colony on Ascension Island created a halo in which fewer fish live, new research suggests. It bugs me sometimes. I'll show you how this actually works. So a new study, I'll show you how this actually works. My God, I don't know where to get. I'll figure it out. I'll show you how this works. Give me a second. When I don't want something, it's always right there in front of me. And when I want it, good luck. I don't know what I got done with it. I'm not there. Here we go. Let's keep going. Let me see. Try one more search. Oh well. Here we go. I don't know what to put in there. Try one more. Oh, look what have it. Normally I'm really good at this, but sometimes. So you got a new research suggests, new study, right? Here's another study that showed up. 4 scientific journals accepted fake study about Star Wars. Star Wars studies. Information overload fuels fake studies. New record, major publishers retracted more than 100 studies from the cancer journals over fake peer reviews. All of them saying chemo is good for you. Retraction note the multiple articles and tumors. So studies, you can't be trusting all of them, obviously, right? Phony peer review, the more we look, the more we find. Paging Dr. Fraud, the fake publishers that are ruining science. China cracks down on fake peer review. And that's what this one up here is. This new study is fake. Ascension, which is out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, right there. It's one of the loneliest spots on the planet, I would say. Ascension, a UK territory, poor things, eh? In the South Atlantic Ocean, is home to tens of thousands of seabirds of various species whose prey includes flying fish. Yeah, but there's other species there. There's not just flying fish. And a new study found flying fish numbers up to 150 kilometers from the island were reduced. But first off, you're out in the middle of the Atlantic. The species don't just live, 100 miles around Ascension Island. Species are crossing the ocean past that migratory point all the time. And it's not just flying fish. It's not the only species out there. Scumbags say this could only be explained by foraging of seabirds. Gee, really? You think it could only be explained by seabirds? You don't suppose, because Ascension is right there with my fingers, it might have something to do with Fukushima killing the food chain? Could only be explained by foraging of seabirds. The missing fish can only be explained. This is what I mean. They got so many scumbags in key positions. Up is down and down is up, and nobody's allowed to have a debate about it. The findings suggest seabird populations are naturally food limited. See, if that was true, then studies would already exist for the last 100 years showing the same equation, right? It's a new study trying to explain away why there's less birds. The pattern of prey depletion revealed in this study is known as a halo, after a British researcher first proposed it 60 years ago after a visit to Ascension Island. So they went back 60 years, found that study, and said, yeah, the ocean is empty. That's what they're saying to you. The ocean is empty. That tens of thousands of birds now will deplete the rest of it. Remember this one? Sonar causes unexplained whale deaths, BBC was claiming. Now, sonar has been around since World War I. If sonars were causing the whales' deaths, there wouldn't actually be a whale left on the planet, because every ship out there got a sonar on it. And so they were saying, oh, the sonars drive them out of the water and causing the strandings and the beachings. The sonars is causing them to get decompression injuries. So they're claiming that the sonar drives the whale up to the surface quickly, and he has air embolism, which is what happened to me a couple of decades ago as a commercial diver with 14,000 hours on the ocean floor. The reason I got decompression illness was because I was breathing compressed air for 6 hours a day, 128 days straight. It's kind of stupid when you think about it now, but back then it was a lot of money. And so whales are not breathing compressed air. I know it's not going to come as a shock to all those researchers, but the whales don't breathe compressed air. That's how you get a decompression injury. In fact, these whales will dive for an hour straight, come up for 3 or 4 minutes, and dive right down a kilometer or more for an hour straight. And they'll do that for 60 years. They can't get decompression injuries. They don't have scuba tanks on their backs. Exceptional year whale deaths grow with another. These are amazing headlines, really. Mink whales are seen in the midst of an exceptional die-off in New England. Actually, they found 100 culvert beak whales a couple of years ago. And the exceptional die-off of whales, they found 5,000 whales and dolphins in just a short period of time. And so they estimated 50,000 must have died, because you only find about 10% if you're lucky, right? But they had found 100 culvert beak whales, and you never see them ever, and they were in different stages of decomposition. They died, but the ones that they were able to check were actually emaciated. Leaked Godzilla trailer hits the web. Now have become Death, the Destroyers of Worlds, which is appropriate. So a couple of days ago, there was 2 whales, humpback whales, were rescued in Argentina. And I provide the documentation of everything for my assertions. I don't even have assertions. I'm just provide the documentation, right? 2 stranded humpback whales rescued within 48 hours. This is a fantastic story. And there's links below to the videos of this. Was the first whale a juvenile female, 32 feet long, 8 tons. And the second was 27 feet long, weighing 7 tons. And extraordinary, these are huge whales, 7 and 8 tons. And these people actually got them to swim away from the coastline. That is absolutely, unbelievably amazing. Right, that is incredible. So they use a loose, very wide, that's a very wide strap. And when the wave came in, they lifted them up and then let them go. And that whale swam away. Incredible, eh? And then they done the same thing with another whale. You can see the people celebrating. Yeah, the video is worth watching. There's a link below. Over in the UK, they'll just come up and put a .50 caliber to his head and kill it right on the spot. And then they'll put up, police will come in, drive you away. They'll cut it open, get the vomit out of it, and sell it for $1 million to the perfume shops. Scumbags in the United Kingdom and the so-called authority. They're degenerates, boy. I love United Kingdom people, but the authorities down there are evil scum. That's all I've ever seen of them. They're all celebrating. Look, the whale swam again. That's twice where the whales swam away. You've got to love it. David Suzuki. So tonight I've showed you several dozen people warning you, right? Fukushima's most terrifying situation I can imagine. That's David Suzuki. I seen a paper that said it's bye-bye Japan and to evacuate the North America West Coast. To evacuate the North America West Coast if that plume happens. And guess what? The plume happened. But not just the coast, you need to abandon the continent. Scientists investigated unprecedented spate of seabird deaths. Unprecedented. Bird flu was ruled out. Domoic acid is ruled out. They didn't get hit by a cargo ship or a UFO. There was some disappointment that the test came back negative. They were literally vicious. Just say it's so. We normally don't find any dead seabirds this time of year. You don't find dead, like the odds of finding 2 dead seabirds pre-Fukushima on the same beach, there's better chances of getting hit by a Soviet satellite in the next 3 seconds. 2, 1. Is unprecedented levels. Tend to see some die in the winter. No, you don't. Well, you have if you're only looking at the last 10 years. Then it's normal, but pre-Fukushima it wasn't normal. It's not just the number of deaths, but we're seeing strange behaviors. Yeah, really? Starving and their strange behaviors. Go figure. Short of food and their usual way of feeding is not working. Like whoever wrote this, whoever they quoted, they're picking their words pretty careful, aren't they? The birds which had been found are highly emaciated. Coincidence? All the animals are emaciated worldwide that we find in these die-offs. We sent 10 of the birds away to test for avian flu, but they came back negative. And this is combined with stormy weather, again, right? Stormy weather. Weakened birds can succumb, sometimes do, in large numbers, Dana. Come a little closer, whisper that in my ear. I could choke you better when you're closer. Climate change, of course, climate change is these big pulses every second now, circling the planet for the next million years, pulsing, heating the planet up, poisoning all the food chain. The birds currently being found along the coast might not be direct climate change casualties. Might not be direct Fukushima failure casualties. How's that? The food chain is broken, they're all starving. Events like this die-off are becoming more common around our coast. Yeah, since Fukushima. We should all recognize the climate. All hail climate. 2 more bears killed on Vancouver Island's west coast, Ucluelet, as people urged to secure attractants. Now, the thing about it, one was significantly emaciated. So, like, bears eat mostly grass and berries. They eat like 200,000 berries a day. And they'll eat fruit off fruit trees. And BC is full of that, man. But they like grass, and they like grubs, and they like berries, and they like roots. You know, they can kill animals. They can kill deer and elk and moose and stuff like that too. They're not just... There's no reason for the bear to be emaciated. We're seeing just repeatedly grizzly bears constantly emaciated. Multiple grizzly bears in a single shot emaciated. I know, because I went up and done the whole coastline. Fukushima crisis comes to the U.S., the new improved version of the original atomic plague. So all the die-offs are suffered from atomic plague. Newfoundland wildlife officer receives praise, but that didn't happen for the first 6-7 days. It was only when people started sharing them on Facebook that the media wanted to take over the narrative. After helping free 7 beach whales, I missed it. I would have drove up and helped them. What was interesting about this story to me was that a lot of the locals, a small group of longfin whales. Now, in January, I went to the west coast. There was 16 or 15 washed up, and which there could be at least 150 that died, and only 15 of them managed to wash up on the beaches, right? And they were spread out over several kilometers, and they were there for 36 days. The locals dragged some of the ones that were right by the highway, the main drag through the community. At nighttime, went down with their ATVs and side-by-sides and dragged them, coupled down, put them into the ocean because the kids didn't want to go to school anymore because they were driving past a dead whale in the morning on their way to school, and at the end of the day they were coming back on the bus past the dead whales. They couldn't sleep at night. They were having nightmares. But the media didn't report on it, and the locals told me when I went up to spend 2 days there, right in January of this year, that if the whales had been wrapped up in halibut or lobster lines or something like that, all the media on the planet would have descended up on their community and vilified the lobster fishermen, right? Now, he was there. There were spectators there taking pictures, obviously. There's people in the community who stood up watching him for 3 hours by himself, shoving whales back out. I'm literally ashamed to call myself a Newfoundlander today. And a small group of long-finned pilot whales beached themselves in nearby Squid Cove in the town of Embry in northern Dane Bay. And this lone worker, he spent 3 hours. He was actually swimming. Over 3 hours, onlookers watched. Imagine standing up, watching a guy down there. He's in his work clothes. I think he works for a government agency. I don't know if it's forestry or one of the industries down there for governments. And he took it upon himself to get the whales back in the water. And he got 7 of them out of 10, I think, back in the water. And he was exhausted. So he'd have to shepherd him away from shore after he got him out in the water because he kept trying to come back. And at some points he was literally swimming in the cold Atlantic Ocean. Yeah, he gave it his all, eh? Wow. An amazing story. They say I went up, there was 15 of them washed up on the West Coast in January, and the media didn't report on it. 36 days gone by. They didn't report on that. I didn't find out about it until about 6 days after it happened. When Facebook starts sharing the story, then the media reported on it, right? It went viral on Facebook. So the media want to take over the narrative, as you see here, right? Newfoundland and Labrador Premier Andrew Furey praised Collier for his quick thinking. Yes, while a group of Newfoundlanders stood there and watched him by himself, struggling in cold water in the Atlantic Ocean, trying to save whales, literally hang my head in shame when I read the story. At the end of the rescue, Bercy asked Collier why he worked so hard. Well, why do you think I worked so hard would have been my response. Moron. His answer was simple. He said, I'm an animal lover. I have to try and set things right. And we're very, very proud of him for doing it. Starving Fukushima cows, abandoned animals. They starved to death. After nuclear meltdown, just ran away, left all their pets and animals and elderly behind, people with Alzheimer's. There's 90 of them in one hospital who just left them there to perish. Because nuclear is wonderful, it's so carbon-free, it makes me want to cry. The truth must be told, columnists. Fukushima is a major global threat to all living flora and fauna. The mainstream media is not your best source. Well, there's not even a source of information, are they? We see tonight. Here's another story from the last couple of days. Could climate change be altering the marine food web? Yes, it is, except it's Fukushima change. It's Fukushima climate change. Radioactive fallout, pulsing energy every second is climate change. That's climate change. Okay, all right. I'm only telling you 500 more times today. Climate change redistributing biodiversity globally. No, it's not. It's killing them off. So they're trying to claim that they're moved somewhere else. This is not what they do, though, right? Most of these species are residential that they're talking about. Just incredible degenerates. Oh, you know, funny in the research provided by that, NOAA, who hid away the models of the radioactive fallout for 4 years before they got leaked out, right? Could climate change be altering the marine food web? Yeah, it's called Fukushima radioactive fallout. It looks like climate change. That is climate change. It's an invisible storm of energy. You can see it on my Geiger counter up there. 300, my God, 17, 300, what? 43 counts? What? 360 counts per minute? My God. This is Vancouver.
One of the questions, which is a very difficult question, and it's a very controversial question, is a question of low-level exposure. Okay, and the reason this question is controversial is that it is very difficult to put your hand on the hard data on low-level exposures. Low-level exposure is very difficult to quantify.
Well, it's not actually, is it? That's what he's saying to you. Blah, 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 blah. Unprecedented number of dead whales are washed up in Scotland. So, that's not low levels of radiation we're talking about. We're talking about an actual event. This is an event. And so he's a paid shill, that guy there. Die-off of mammals, birds, reptiles, western United States. So many diseases affecting such a wide variety of animals. Names out of a science fiction thriller. Hemorrhagic diseases. Slovactic plague. Sperm whale carcasses wash up on the East Iceland beach. That's emaciated. Look at that. Scientists bizarrely blame whale watching for the beaching of whales. That was Iceland too, Reykjavik. Remember that a couple of years ago? We covered all that. It is irresponsible of the MRI to make such a public statement without scientific data or research to back it up, yeah. Famous actor. Fukushima is dumping the nuclear fuel into the Pacific, and plutonium is named after the devil. The entire biosphere at risk from these poisons fatal to everything with replicating cells. So all species are equally at threat, right? Salmon die-off incident. Now this was hypoxia again. We're seeing this each story, multiple stories of hypoxia in the ocean, in the open ocean, which means the ocean is dying. So you can't blame the farmer because the ocean is dying. Study. Fukushima airborne plumes cause significant disposition of radioactivity over northern America, especially for the west coast and eastern USA. They're trying to claim that it's just 13% or something like that. This is absurd, by the way. It never stops coming out of the reactors. They're melting down, and that could go on for 10,000 years, those releases, see? Kelowna man recounts watching a dog, watching a man, and I got that cut out, did I, accidentally? Kelowna man recounts watching a man kill a cougar, an emaciated cougar, to protect his dogs. Here's some pictures that was taken a couple of days before. That's an emaciated cougar, buddy. The video is linked below. It's a hard video to watch. The cougar's starving, obviously. He walks up and just grabs the dog. Buddy comes out with a machete and dispatches the cougar. It's out in British Columbia, I guess. I think the cat was kind of in a state where it was either like it had to eat or he was going to die. So why did he say that? I wonder, well, you know, because he was emaciated. Cougar starving, the killing was considered illegal. That's mad, though, isn't it? Isn't that mad? Emaciated cougar, man. Wow. Because all the deer now are dying off. Who saw a story of a cougar attack, reached out, a reader, and shared photos he took of an emaciated cougar lying on the side of the road just a few kilometers away from where the attack occurred 4 days later. So we saw it lying on the side of the road, passed by about 10 feet away and took a few pictures. He sent them to forestry, I think. But the forestry said they couldn't do nothing. Experts agree many species of wildlife and fisheries are endangered globally due to the large radioactivity into the ocean at Fukushima. Experts agree species and fisheries are endangered globally. Yeah. Death riddle mystery as thousands of birds are found dead after falling from the sky. And we've seen this happen, right, with millions of them. The common murres, they dive 600 feet all day long for anchovies and squid and sardines and krill and that. Experts are fearing the emergence of a new. Why did that? Why new? You got no evidence of a new. After thousands of birds. Now, these birds didn't fall out of the sky. They're washed up on the beach symmetrical. Look at that. They're washed up at the high tide line. See that? There's a big long string of them. They're all in the same spot. So they didn't all fall from the sky in a straight friggin' line. You know what I mean? You mean what I know? Scientists believe, well, if they don't know, they should shut their pie holes. Could be. They believe and could be. It's called speculation. It's called a conjecture. It's called an opinion. And a nasty one at that. Oh, because you found a bunch of dead birds, must be a new type. In other words, this was like testing the water with your toes. And if they have more die-offs, yeah, this is a new virus. They didn't starve to death, it was the virus, Dana. They all died of coronavirus, Dana. They hate us. I don't know why they hate us, eh? At least 7,000 black-necked geebles, sea doves, and gulls were discovered dead on the beach. Degenerates believe the final conclusion must be made by veterinarians. So they won't put that at the first paragraph because you're not going to read the rest of the story. Or if you do, you're going to be like scumbags. So they're very methodical how they lie to us, yeah? They don't even bother using grammar. Although an infectious disease is most likely to cause. They can't help it, eh? They got a little hat full of excuses, and they shake it, and they pull out 3 or 4 of them. And they write this down. It could be an infectious disease. Put that in there. They go, oh, probably some kind of new avian flu. Better put that in there. Well, yeah, put that in there. I want to see that in the story. But poisoning ecological situations could be a factor. Maybe they all got uranium suppositories. Maybe that's it. From Fukushima. The authorities in crime have not yet commented on a suspected bird flu. This is by the degenerates to sun, right? A flockalypse, right? So they even mock it. No shame at all, eh? It comes after hundreds of ravens died after plummeting to earth in front of a shocked villagers. Villagers. Not people, but villagers. They hate us. That's why they got the job they got. Unprecedented number of seabirds were found dead or starving in the Northumberland coast. Hundreds of guillemots and razorbills and smaller numbers of puffins and kittiwakes. The cause of their demise is unknown. And why might these precious be creatures dying in such large numbers? Just get out your hat of excuses, fill it up with excuses, and pick and choose at the drop of a hat. The largest disease outbreak that we've ever known of ever in the ocean, now hitting the west coast. Potential for global extinction. Global extinction. Catastrophic mortalities. One of history's largest wildlife die-offs. I think this was 2016, yeah.
One of the biggest mysteries Alaska has seen in some time. What caused hundreds of thousands of seabirds to wash up on our shores?
The sick and starving seabirds were murres.
Many of the birds, when we perform the necropsies, they actually have empty stomachs, so we're not finding any food.
My God, man. Mysteries of 1,000 dead Scottish seabirds. And their unfamiliar visitors, wary of coming too close to humans, yet there they were, far from their normal feeding grounds, even paddling unusually up rivers. Yeah, everybody was shocked. What are they doing? Well, they were starving to death. Thousands found dead on the coast of Scotland in the last couple of weeks. Were they poisoned? The victims of plastic? Gotta blame you, right? They gotta put that connotation out there. They gotta frame that narrative as you're dirty and you caused it. What was striking about how emaciated the birds were, many weighed half their normal body weight, just over half a kilogram. I done that again, did I? I'm supposed to have the volume turned down on the graphics, because Sometimes I accidentally leave my microphone on when I'm rendering this stuff. It killed the food chain. And we're not trying to come up with solutions because we're trying to blame it on everything it's not. The only way we're going to come up with solutions is if we admit what the issue is. That's how it works in the real world. Covering up with imaginary boogeymen constantly is not a solution. It's childish, not childlike, but childish. And that's what we're getting from the academic world, is childish. Researchers at the Center for Ecology and Hydrology have confirmed that the birds had indeed died of starvation. Wow, I'm over overwhelmed. The birds are desperate. They're calling, sitting on the river shores because they are probably starving and are not able to find food, not even in the freshwater river. That's what we're seeing with the cormorants. They abandoned the west coast. Now they showed up all across Canada. They're now on the east coast. But we also seen that with the common murres. They were finding tens of thousands of them in little ponds way inland. Some of them actually were eating insects. These are divers, used to dive 600 feet all day. Couldn't find anything on the coastline, and as I showed you at the beginning, the coastline is stripped naked because of Fukushima. And so they're going to say overfished or declined. So it was plastic. It was plastic. What else did you blame it on? The most logical explanation is that there is a problem with their food supply. In other words, all of these stories, it's just conjectures, just opinions, yeah? And they'll get like 10 paragraphs of opinions, and then they say, well, best leave it up to the veterinarian to figure it out. But all opinions are basically attacking you. So California fishermen skunked, haven't seen a squid, usually 10,000 pounds a day. Complete crashes at the oyster hatcheries. The sardines and mackerel are missing. Pelican sites are deserted. Record of 6 sea lions, ultra rare whales after decades. Mammals, birds, fish in odd places.
Global warming means there's now much less sea ice than in years gone by. Polar bears depend on the ice to survive. This is where they hunt seals, rest and breed. But Jon Ors, the world's leading expert on polar bears, is concerned.
And if you feel here, you can really feel all the bones.
This 19-year-old male, a relatively old bear, is dangerously thin, despite an apparent abundance of food. More research is needed to find out why. For the first time ever, scientists on Svalbard have recorded polar bears eating dolphins in the Arctic. They shouldn't even be here at this time of year.
Emaciated bears, and there's over 3,000 of them that are emaciated. But what happens is the radioactive fallout covers, let me get another model, covers all the glaciers with this incredible continuous plume fallout of radiation. The radiation doesn't allow the ice to crystallize anymore. And so going back and forth to Alaska year after Fukushima, doing research and species counts, research expeditions, we noticed within a few years the glaciers completely disappeared. And I had done interviews with CBC, for instance, and when I got to the glaciers, they cut me off and hung up on me. And they wouldn't play those interviews. They did 2 interviews in a row with me. They were looking for some way to attack me. And I was just saying, like, get a marine biologist and go over to my website and explain that. And they hung up on me. So these radioactive fallout, now the glaciers, when you melted the glaciers, what you end up doing was that water was the water during droughts. You would get, the glaciers would melt a bit more, and that would raise the levels of the rivers and the streams and the estuaries and the lakes, and regulate the temperatures of all of them, regardless, each year, and it regulates the temperatures of the coastline, the nursery of the Pacific Ocean. And so when you got rid of the glaciers because of the radioactive fallout, you've seen a complete failure. But also that water trickled out into the forest. And now the radiation coming over, sequestering the forest, kills the bacteria in the forest don't break down. So when you have forest fires, now you have much more foliage because it didn't break down like it used to do, because you killed off the bacteria, which supports the ecosystem. Pygmy sperm whales, mothers and calves, stranded on a beach. One had to be killed. And they were stranded whales. By the time the stranding team, the marine mammal stranding team, we're seeing that now everywhere. There's endless crews of these people created since Fukushima. And you're not, if they show up, you're driven away immediately. Arrived from Florida Atlantic University Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute in Fort Pierce. So, long acronyms. But anyway, little is known about these whales, including the population, because they're rare and hard to find. This is what we've been documenting now for many years, was these die-offs of species. That's older pictures. That's got nothing to do with the actual event. Plutonium uranium flow into the ocean from Fukushima. Heavily contaminated waters leaking out of the plant. Melted fuel releasing hundreds of different radioactive materials. Officials refused to investigate 90% of them. It's 1,000, 1,200 fission products that we're worried about that are emitted and are traveling around the planet and killing off the species. Dead whale and human-caused injuries found on New York shores. An necropsy was done on the whale, which returned to be in good physical condition and had a stomach full of fish, indicating it had just been fed. But the problem was that the whale went from 13 inches of blubber down to 3 inches of blubber, and it finally found a meal, but because it had lost all of its blubber, it was emaciated. The meal, it takes a long time to rebuild the blubber. And oh yeah. Oh, that's not what I want. There we go, that's better. Necropsy team found indications of 2 human-caused injuries, healing wounds around the mouth and head associated with entanglement, and a big piece of metal debris trapped in the stomach, causing digestive system damage. He had a full stomach of fish, so the whale was determined to be in good physical condition. So they can't make up their mind. In the first paragraph, he's in good physical condition. Got a stomach full of fish, like he'd just been fed. And the next sentence, he had all kinds of wounds on him, human wounds on him, a big piece of metal trapped in his stomach, causing digestive system damage. That's called schizophrenia, where I come from, by the way. That's called perpetual lawyers. Thousands of whales, dolphins, other marine species wash up on beaches all around the planet annually. No, that's simply not true. Pre-Fukushima. You scumbag for saying that. You degenerate coward for saying that. You despicable coward. You monster for saying that. Beaching or stranding is a phenomenon that occurs in both healthy people and damage or dead animals who are blown ashore by strong winds. So beaching and stranding is a phenomenon that occurs in both healthy people and dead animals or damaged animals. Whoever wrote this article is a moron. Plague along the west coast is biologists fearing extinction of species. But the reason I covered that other article is because that headline has been at the top of the search engine for about a week straight. The scumbags, man. It's the propaganda machine is what you're seeing, right? Plague along the west coast is biologists fearing an extinction of species. Take your kids to the beach and see them before they're gone. The worst outbreak ever known in the oceans. And a catastrophic loss is nearly everywhere they've been. This is a murderer. She kills children in the United Kingdom with radiation. And then she goes out and tells people in presentations that radiation from nuclear meltdowns, you get bigger dose sucking on a banana than you would from a nuclear meltdown. The number of puffin chicks that are surviving on Maine's coastal islands dropped significantly this year. Struggles with storms. We're seeing this. They're throwing that in every bird die-off now. It's bad storms, Dana. Predation and food shortages and bubble gum. Most were unlikely to survive. 90% of the nesting puffins failed to produce a chick. Yeah, it's because there's no food there. That's how come it works that way. Sailor talks Fukushima impact on the Pacific is dead for thousands of miles. There was nothing. This is Rupert Winfield Hayes. He's pretending he's at Unit 3. This is BBC. I superimposed him where the fuel pool is.
This is very strange to be standing inside here because this huge structure I'm standing inside is right on top of reactor building number 3. And down underneath me here is the melted reactor core inside this building. Over the top here they have built a shield to lower the radiation levels so that we can come up here, so that workers can come up here to construct this. But radiation levels are still very high here, and because of that we can only spend a few minutes here. Now if you come over here, there's my alarm going off. This is the spent fuel pool. Down inside here are more than 560 spent fuel assemblies.
He's at the top of a building that don't exist. What do you think they're doing that for? Scientists think they found the reason for Maine's prize shrimp fishery collapse. They're blaming it on squid that shouldn't be there. Mystery phenomenon off the U.S. West Coast. Fish disappeared. Whales are absent. No krill. High rates of egg failures among the birds. There's nothing there, just a lot of warm, clear water, which is, I reported on that year after year while I was up there. Because normally when all the species are sperming, all the mussels and all the sea urchins and sea anemones and all the oysters and all the clams and the manillas and the little necks, all the species are sperming into the water, right? And so the water becomes really very hard to see in. But what I was seeing the whole time I was up there through those seasons was just pure, beautiful, clear water. You see all the way to the ocean floor everywhere you went, which is extraordinary, right? It was exceptional. We never seen that. And I spent years and years on that ocean. And so how's the poll going? Is radioactive plumes that cover the entire northern hemisphere continuously, global warming. We got 40 votes, and bizarrely 12% of the people can't wrap their mind around it, or their public relation firms. So it works this way. you have, this is the radioactive fallout model. It's much worse than that. And that's only up to March the 16th. That's just a 4-day release plume. But it's pulsing energy every second at the speed of light. Every second at the speed of light. A beluga whale reported sighting up in Seattle. Beluga whales don't hang out in Seattle, by the way. Fukushima is a major event in Washington with radioactive aerosols. I showed you earlier was 450,000 times normal, not 100,000 times. But that was one of the first reports. Models showed West Coast completely blacked out due to radioactive particles covering it. And Gunnarsson lied to us about the reactor fuel pools. He's part of the cover-up. Fukushima is an apocalyptic disaster will haunt future generation. The world now an experimental lab. So that's a real picture of a surfer walking past the emaciated seal. I put the rest of it in there for something to do. Because I get bored sometimes, and that's what I do. Coral reefs are dying. Now, I covered that last one of these presentations a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. And coral reefs, they had groups, because it's illegal to take coral out of the ocean, but they had groups that were taking out hundreds of corals in order to try to save them before they disappeared. Terrifying. So they're calling it bleaching, but what it is, it's radioactive fallout has choked off all the oceans, as you can see. Here's some of the excuses they give you for radiation. You like this, maybe.
These levels of radiation are just above natural background at the WIP site. And so there is no expectation that those measurements for you or your children or anyone else will show exposure on a lung count. They're down in the levels of licking your iPhone charger. And I'm not trying to be funny, I'm trying to equate radiation exposure to something that you can understand.
It's down to the level of licking your iPhone charger. This is probably going to come as a shock to somebody. Probably the people who voted know that radioactive fallout is global warming. But licking your iPhone charger got nothing to do with anthropogenic man-made radiation. It really don't. Only a scumbag would say something like that. So global surface of the oceans. Sea surface. Temperatures have been rising. Well, the sea, because the ocean's this great big thing. It's massive. Covers over 70% of the planet. And the minute you're having wind or wave action, the surface will get mixed in with the rest of the water table. All right, and so they've been trying to use this as an excuse since Fukushima, but that's not how the ocean actually works. But they're trying to use that because the phytoplankton live at the surface. And so they're trying to utilize this version to account for the die-off of the phytoplankton. Because the cover-up, the controlled opposition is all of your media, all of your universities. Your regulators were captured a long time ago. In fact, they are the industry itself. They're actually just lobbyists for the nuclear industry. And shocking mangrove failures in Australia. So there was 9,000 activists protest, 9,000 people protested, participated in a protest against building a nuclear power plant in an impoverished community. The police came out and beat them all up and charged 9,000 protesters. 9,000 got charged with sedition. That's how powerful the nuclear industry actually is.
And living next to a nuclear power station can actually contribute less than your loved one when it comes to...
Okay, so I'm going to play that again. So what he's saying is that if you live next to a nuclear power plant, you get a bigger dose sleeping next to somebody than you do from living next to a nuclear power plant. So he talks about radiation, he equates it to cosmic radiation, terrestrial radiation coming up from the ground. These are not radiations, we're already acclimated to them through genetics pure selection. Atmospheric sources, natural radiation in the human body, sleeping next to a human for 8 hours every night, living next to a nuclear power plant, coal-fired plant, stand in front of a granite at the U.S. Capitol, a Tokyo flight, and smoking 30 cigarettes a day. Robert Gale, who does transplants, says you get more radiation from 15 minutes in a canoe than you do from Fukushima nuclear meltdown if working right alongside of it. But this guy here, he actually got $6 million from the nuclear industry.
And living next to a nuclear power station can actually contribute less than your loved one when it comes to... with myself as one of the principal investigators, was awarded $6 million. $6
million. So he had no incentive to lie, did he? Now listen to everybody laugh. How did they know to laugh? How did everybody know to laugh at that one point? Watch.
And living next to a nuclear power station can actually contribute less than your loved one when it comes to...
So how did everybody know to laugh at that point right there? Because the audience is full of nuclear cult, the secret society, the death cult. And they knew that's an insult, right? They couldn't help but laugh. The arrogance to say something like that. Oh, by the way, he got $6 million for that arrogance. Okay. Now, we had 2 donations last night. Warren donated $5. Thank you, Warren. And John M. donated $1,000. We thank John. We're in desperate mode. $2,000 in the hole, so that's a huge deal. Takes an enormous amount of pressure off. I was out today on the trail. I didn't show you that. We got time to flick through a bit of that, I think. Yeah, this was about 6 hours ago, this first video. This was about 6 hours ago. I was getting ready to head home. I got lost. I was like, great, I gotta find a spot to turn around. Not much I can do, I gotta keep going until I can find a spot to turn around. And I was out yesterday too. Now I didn't find any no spider webs whatsoever. No spider webs whatsoever. Oh yeah, that was hang on. And so the idea was I was going to go down and look for fish, but such a shallow river I couldn't find a spot, and there's pretty heavy winds. But we got a heavy rain tomorrow, so I'll head back out in a couple of days because there'll be a lot of mud out there for the next couple of days, so I'll take a couple of days away from that, which is too bad. And I found around 200. I found around 200 young dragonflies. I wanted to go back today and get pictures of them. And I didn't get the pictures I was hoping to get. I did find some of them, but I wasn't able to confirm it was dragonflies. I didn't have the camera with me yesterday. I had the drone with me. And so I got to try to find a path down to this area here and get down there on the quad and take the equipment down there and see if I can find any fish down in the river, that corner of the pond, is the plan for the next trip I get out. So this year we lost, this year we went on expeditions, and what we discovered was an extinction event. Let me come and say goodnight to everybody, I guess. Good night, everybody. We'll see everybody on Sunday night. They had an earthquake in Japan tonight also. Thank you, everyone. Extra hugs for John for donating. Big donation for, it's been quite a while since we got a real donation like that. And it's a huge deal. Good night, Johnson. Adrian Johnson. Otis. James Lucid. Yeah, he is so, John. Thank you. Or James. Shayla White. Hi, Shayla. Hope you're doing good. HTMLSAM. Chuck. James Ward. Yeah, I seen that in Puget Sound. Wow, moved up the coast in a short time, eh? Kevin Blanche is in the house tonight. Hi, Kevin. Colette S. Hi, Colette. Joe, 230. I'll turn that down. Joe, 239. Giant is in the house. Trevor. Good night, everybody. Noel, Knoll. Annie Archie. Bob Denver. Good night, everybody. I'm glad. Sandra Churchill. Hi, Sandra. I made it through the week anyway. Tough week this week. Got a good boost tonight. That's a huge deal. Our donation covers a lot of expenses that were causing me incredible grief. Takes a lot of stress off. That's a big deal on its own, right? That's worth its weight many times over to get that off the big gorilla off my back for a while. I'll just come in, quick shout out to everybody. I want to get the video under 2 hours so I can post it at other sites where there's a limitation of 2 hours. And we hit it right on the nose. Charles Sands. You're welcome, Colette. Thank you, Dana, for caring about even stupid people. Well, I do. Fabian Gang. Hi, Fabian. You're welcome. Marie French. We had a few trolls showed up tonight. I got rid of them, but looks like they had their go at me. Eric Morrison. Yeah, I see the trolls hit us hard there earlier, eh? Wow, I didn't see that. I only serve one king. Hi, Laurie. Christopher Leiber. Good night, everybody. Port Angeles is on the other side of the ocean or something? Way across the pond. I gotta go close the poll off. Let's end the poll. We have 48 votes. 90% of the people says those radioactive plumes I showed all night that cover the entire northern hemisphere, they call that global warming. And I concur. That's global warming. I'm grateful that everybody participated in that. Yeah, hugs Shayla, Colette. God bless all of you folks. Joe, have a good night, my friend. James Oldhand. Hi, James. Good to see you. Only serve one king. Otis, Adrian, James Lucid, Shayla. I think we got everybody. I'm doing okay. I'm doing much better tonight. I got a lot of stress off me tonight. So that's huge. And we got a good show in tonight with lots of documentation. Not opinion, but documentation with the evidence. No, I don't have an opinion. I have evidence. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up. If you're watching this later, hugs for you and everybody else that's in the background. God bless everybody. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see everybody on Sunday night. And we go to battle every day regardless. We go to war every day. We never take a step back. We always take a step forward. Have a great night, folks. We'll see everybody on Sunday. Take care.